Thank you for welcoming me back to your membership meeting in March. And this is an interesting program. It's only been given 2 other times, and it's because the content material was so voluminous that it had to be broken up into 2 programs to cover everything that was covered in the book. But I think you're going to enjoy tonight because it kind of covers the 100 years of operation. The first program kind of ended after the L was opened up. And so we're just going to see a few slides in the beginning, which picks up the story with the opening and the opening of the line and the celebration week. Again, I'd like to express recognition and appreciation to all these groups that provided content for the program tonight, the program earlier last month, and of course the book. So last month there was a rush job because SEPTA had moved forward to redesignate the Market Frankfurt line as Route L. And I had to do a rush job in getting the timetable cover scanned, but that's the new route. So we're talking about the L tonight. And we're also talking about the northern segment between Frankfurt Transportation Center and Spring Garden Street. So starting in November of 1922, there were a lot of things that took place. Both the Frankford Elevated and the Bustleton trolley line were completed. The week-long celebration ensued. Service began, 100 years of operation followed, feeder routes were upgraded, and that's going to be a focus of tonight's program. New equipment arrived, and then it was time, of course, to rebuild the structure and the terminal station up at Breach Pratt. So here we are. I think you remember this slide. We all came out to celebrate all the period of disruption that occurred during the construction of the line. And finally, the opening. Apparently, hats were not optional. Here is a restored horse car that was put on the trolley rails and brought up to the ceremony at Bridge Street. And apparently, it was restored and placed somewhere for at least a year after the line opened up in 1922, because there's a picture of it in 23, but I don't know what happened to that car. What we're looking at here is a guide that I just discovered dated August 1st, 1887, and it shows some of the horse car routes that operated in Frankfurt. It's just a quick step back into history to see what was there before the elevated and electric trolleys start operating through Frankfurt. So here we are, we're up at Bridge Street. You can see the throngs of participants coming out to hear the speakers. They included the Mayor Moore and William Twining, who was the chief transit engineer for the city, and other PRT company officials. It was the plaque. This plaque, we're still looking for it. It was mounted in the Hammonds building to commemorate the completion of the elevated. It was taken down during the Frankfurt Transportation Center construction, stored, and it is not to be found. The car on the right is an example of photoshopping back in 1922. That car was one of 5 cars used to start service on the Bustleton trolley, but there was a photo studio just to the right of the trolley, and they superimposed the old dummy depot and behind the car in this picture. By the time that car was positioned there for the opening of the L, that building was gone. So here we are, we're looking at the Breach Pratt platform, nobody on it yet. This is days before the start of service. There's the cars waiting for their first passengers. We're all ready to go. This is what Bridge Street looked like before the L was built up to this point. In 1917, the elevated structure had been completed to Dyer Street, which was just around the corner from the photo on the left. And then, of course, by 1922, you see the elevated's in place with only a few people standing on the platform. So it's not in service yet. And that car is somewhat of a stranger to this area. It is marked special, and it probably brought company officials up to the speaking engagement of the day. So I'm going to show you some dates. We're going to walk through all these items. I'm not going to read all these dates for you, but I'll give you a little bit of time just to survey them. There'll be 3 pages of important dates that will occur during the 100 years of elevated operation. I'm going to cover Route 66 because the Frankford Elevated was originally intended to be built as far as Broad Street. They deferred the construction of that portion beyond Bridge Street. Of course, it never got built, and 66 had to play that role. Here are some more important dates. You can see the introduction of trackless trolleys on certain routes that were feeding the elevated. There were new platforms built. Of course, we got new equipment. SEPTA was created in 64. There was a big change in 77 with the I-95 construction. And then coming home, the following stretch, the home stretch, we see new cars coming in 99. You got new trackless coming in 79. And then finally, the Frankford Elevated celebrated 100 years of service in November of 2022. So let's go back to 1926. There's a postcard view of the Delaware River Bridge, and you see there's rapid transit running on the outside of the bridge and trolley cars running on top of the bridge. And of course, that never opened. The bridge didn't open with any of those services. It wasn't until 1936 that rapid transit was opened across the bridge, and trolleys, of course, never were operated. But I call people's attention to this photograph, but there was track. And I guess the track was there to bring construction materials to finish the project. This is in 1925, so no trolleys.
Is there any provision for trolley tracks?
There were the outer lanes were set aside for the trolley tracks in case of any future installation. They were not completed as roadway lanes until later. There was stations built in the anchorages on both sides of the river. And there was a doorway in one of the anchorages to build a connecting station to the Frankford Elevated. But none of that was actually acted on. There was also, I guess, trolley station built under Franklin Square. I'm told tonight that somebody found track in there. They said it was trolley track. That's just a secondhand report, but it was never operated as a trolley line. There was all kinds of issues because the track gauges were incompatible with the South Jersey operation of public service and the city transit division, or the PRT in Philadelphia. So it was only intended to come across the bridge, loop, and go back if it ever did operate. And there was other options where the cars from Philadelphia could have gone across the bridge and looped around Camden and come back. But that was never acted either. So, and also by that time, I'm sorry I'm going down this rabbit hole, but by that time, a lot of the trolley services in South Jersey were being converted over to bus. All right, so here is a shot of the main ferry terminal at the base of Market Street on Delaware Avenue. And I just saw this tonight. I had to call it out to our audience, and that sign says electric trains to Atlantic City. So here is the bridge looming over the Delaware Avenue elevated. It's its future is uncertain at this point. The line was built down Delaware Avenue to feed 2 main ferry terminals at the Front Street. I'm sorry, Delaware and Market, and then the Reddings was at Chestnut Street, and then I think the Redding had another facility down at South Street where the end of the line is on the right, but its future is uncertain. And sure enough, in 1939, the Delaware Avenue Elevated is retired. The nail in the coffin was most likely the introduction of rapid transit service across the Delaware River Bridge in 1936. In order to replace the service, they started a bus route, I think it was called F1. So here you see the elevator is now being taken down, and there's the F1 bus. And now this is a major change that's going to really affect the operation of the Frankford Elevated. There's, we'll see that picture again. Ferry service lasted until 1952. And you can see how the hairpin turn where the Market Street subway elevated was extended down Delaware Avenue. It came up, we were just talking about this tonight. The grade on the trackage that came out from underneath the tunnel on Market Street turned left onto front, and then went from subway up onto an elevated structure where the blue starts. It was 4.6%. So changes to the Frankford Elevated, and we're going to run through these years. Now, I want to go back to the fact that the Delaware Avenue Elevated ended in 1939. Well, what that meant was all the trains that operated from 69th Street that used to get split at Front and Arch Street, with half the service going down Delaware Avenue and the other half going up to Frankfurt, that all got swung over and operated to Frankfurt. Well, the Frankfurt Elevated really wasn't built to handle that volume of trains, apparently, because in 1942, they couldn't handle all the train service going up to the end of the line due to a substation capacity limitations. So they ended some of the trips up at Erie Tarsdale during the war effort. In 1948, a new terminal opened up at Arrott Street, and that involved the change in direction of two major streets through Frankfurt. In 1952, more capacity issues. They had to build a new lateral platform at Bridge Street to turn trains quicker. So we'll see that. 1956, the bus depot at Frankfurt got converted from rail to bus, and 1,001 new buses were purchased from GMC. And if anybody's interested in why there's 1,001 buses, I'll tell you that story. 1956, a new escalator was added at Bridge Street. Of course, in 1960, we know the new Bud-built L cars came, 270 of them, to replace 315 older cars. So here we are with the World War II service adjustments, and this is explaining to the passengers why all the trains aren't running through to the end of the line. And it's basically due to substation capacity limitations. Another wartime change occurred on Route 73. It had been discontinued in 1941, but the pull-out rail for Route 15 required the overhead wire and trackage to remain in place. So when the war got underway and they needed more capacity to move workers to the Frankfurt Arsenal, they restored Route 73 trolley service in 1943. And of course, Route 15 did not end at Richmond and Westmoreland. It ran all the way through up to Bridge and Milner, also to serve the Frankfurt Arsenal. But by 1948, Route 73 got converted to bus, and Route 15 got cut back to Richmond and Allegheny, and it no longer was being operated out of Frankfurt Depot. Here's that platform I was talking about that they added in 1952. There's an older Market Street train in the station. You can see the construction's underway, and then the finished product is on the right, and that allowed trains to return quicker at the platform. Here you see Frankfurt and Pratt as a terminal with full trolley operation on routes 3, 5, and 66. Here's a car sitting on Frankfurt Avenue underneath the elevated. My understanding is this car was converted into a Peter Wick configuration with a center exit door later in its life, around 1921. Here's a couple color views of Route 5 operating with PCC cars, which were a rare sight up here, but they did operate. And of course, Route 3. And then, of course, the ferry ended. Here's the last day of service on March 31st, 1952. Saturday. And then a big conversion occurred. There were 9 routes that got converted to rubber tired operation in an 8-year period, starting in 1948. Some went to trackless, 3 routes went to trackless, the others went to bus. Frankford Depot, you can see it was an all-rail operation. I actually drove out of this depot for SEPTA, and none of that was there. And people told me about all the trolleys that used to be there. And when I walked up, it looked like the photo on the right. And there's your 1,001 buses, all built about the same time at about a 3-year period. This is what Frankfurt Rail Depot served. There's all these different routes that were served out of the depot. And then here's the new escalator going in at Bridge Street to facilitate passenger movement, get them off the platform quicker. So here's the old fleet, and there you are. On the left, you see what they look like in service. And then after the new Bud-built cars came in 1960, 5 of the Frankfurt cars were retained for work train use. A couple were for the revenue train, and others were for just simple work train service. And then here comes the new Bud cars from Red Line plant of the Bud Company coming down Welsh Road in Bustleton. This was an exciting day for a lot of the Market Frankfurt line riders. And here they are. Man, they looked shiny. Brand new lightweight cars. They were fast, and they were too fast. We'll see that in a second. Here's Mayor Richardson Dilworth up at the Bridge and Pratt to join the ceremony with the introduction of these new modern cars. Of course, they weren't air conditioned. There was a modification of the cars to accommodate air conditioning to be installed at a later date for 100 of those cars, but it was never done except for 1. And we'll see that in a second. Yes, the cars did get away at least once at the York Street curve in 1961. Vince, thank you very much for supplying me this photograph. I put that in the program as soon as you sent it to me. And on the right, you can see people are getting bussed while they fix the tracks and restore the service. So here's the companion project to the Frankford Elevated, and that was the Frankfurt, Bustleton, and Byberry Trolley, otherwise known as Route 59. It was originally intended to be a double-track, high-capacity trolley service to be built in 2 segments. The first segment would have been built to Lott Street up in Bustleton, and the second segment would have extended the line up Bustleton all the way to Roosevelt Boulevard and Southampton Road. That's where Byberry Hospital or Byberry Farms was at the time. As we heard in the first program, the war had a huge impact on funding for the project, the availability of steel for the project, and that took a toll on the scope of building this line as well. Only the first segment was open to Lott Street. It opened with 5 Brill Bernie cars, which only sat 33 passengers. It had very limited double track operation, and that constrained the frequency of service. But by 1928, ridership had grown, and they started using larger double-ended cars in place of the Bernie cars. They started extending double track and adding sidings to improve the frequency of the service. In 1942, they double tracked through Oxford Circle. Up until that time, the line actually converged into a single track and operated in both directions around the northern leg of the circle, which is, if you know that area today, you'd say, how in the world did that happen? But by 42, they pushed it through the center of the circle. In 1948, Arrott Street Terminal was radically changed. Route 59 itself was cut back to Cotman Avenue, short of Bustleton. They put a bus service in place called the 59B to provide service to Bustleton. And why was the route cut back all the way to Cotman Avenue? Well, they wanted to improve Castor Avenue, where the route operated in anticipation of putting in trackless. So they wanted that project to be completed first before they re-extended the line back up to Bell's Corner. PTC spent about $1 million on the Arrott Street Transportation Center. And of course, 1950 trackless trolleys were introduced on the line, and the line was extended back to Bell's Corner. So here you can see a comparison of the Bernie cars that operated on the line when it opened. There were only 5 of them. They were one-man car operation. But then you got these larger double truck cars, and you could increase the seating capacity by 50%, and actually the standee capacity by much more. Here's the double tracking through Oxford Circle. It's a great shot. It's not as sharp as I would have liked it to be, but you can see there's 3 cars going through the circle and heading onto Castor Avenue. Here's the 59 being cut back at Cotman Avenue. And in one shot, I saw a video of a 59B cutting across behind the car. Kind of neat. Of course, we had to commemorate the end of service up to Bustleton. So they dug out one of the Bernie cars, and the NRHS ran a fan trip. But unfortunately, when they got to Ripley Street on the upper right, they derailed. So there's 3 line cars tied up while the company had to come out and get this single truck car back on the track. And there it is crossing the Pennypack Bridge on the lower right. They also, excuse me, sorry about that. They also had a major reroute of traffic through Arrott Street. Can you guys still hear me? Okay, okay. So that you may not be aware of the fact that Arrott Street was eastbound originally, and Orthodox was westbound. Here's a couple of views of Route 75 where it's operating eastbound through Arrott Street, about to cross Frankford Avenue on its way to Port Richmond. In the background is the 1893 substation that was built to power the streetcars. And you can see the dummy depot is still standing in 1912. There's the substation, and we're looking all the way up Arrott Street. Here's a 75 coming underneath the Reading Railroad tracks at the Arrott Street station on Arrott Street. There's the station for reference. Here you can see this is the pre-1948 street direction going through Frankfurt, eastbound on Arrott and westbound on Orthodox. There was also a bus terminal that used to function somehow on this little narrow street called Overington, where the Frankford Library is just to the right there. And you had 3 bus routes that brought passengers into this area. They also corrected this situation by moving the J and the K buses over to Arrott Street Terminal once the street directions were changed. P stayed there for a while. I think it's been combined with Route 25 now. So, of course, we have to commemorate the last day of operation on Arrott Street going eastbound with the Bernie car and the NRHS trip. Another piece of right-of-way that Route 75 ran on as private right-of-way is this piece right here. It became Ramona Avenue 2 years after the trolley service was converted to trackless. The trackless ran on Castor Avenue, Wyoming, and this became available for conversion to public use. So we have a question of truth in journalism on the left, and a big celebration of the introduction of trackless on the right. This is a Joe Basha provided photo where all the Brill coaches are lined up on Castor Avenue, ready to go into service on Route 75 in April of 1948. But the truth in journalism question is something, I can read the caption to you. It says, Route 75 trackless sit abandoned east of Frankford Avenue on Margaret Street. Well, First of all, that's Orthodox Street. And second of all, they're not abandoned. They're waiting for passengers to transfer off the L. So don't believe everything you read in the newspapers.
Get chops.
Yeah, good old chops. That's what they went in. Driver's in there right now. So here's Arrott Street Terminal as promoted by PTC. You can see the buses are loading over on the left, and the trackless is coming through on the other boarding platform. That's where both 75 came through from Brightsburg as a trackless route. And then they also operated Route 59 as a rail route for 2 years, looping it through the terminal. And you can see on the right, there's a 59 coming up Arrott Street, about to turn on Penn Street. And for that 2-year period, the city of Philadelphia financed the installation of a streetcar track on Penn Street for a couple blocks over to Oxford to allow this operation to take effect. Here you can see another view where they're using Hog Island cars on Route 59. These were 4-motor cars and drew a lot of power. And then over on the left, you see a Route J bus, which has now been designated Route 41. I can't keep up with all these route changes. It's driving me crazy. So here's the loop that I was talking about, where 59 would come down Oxford. Normally, as a double-ended car route, it would just reverse in the street and go back up. But in 1948, they built the loop that will allow it to go through the Arrott Street terminal. Of course, the street direction helped that facilitate that terminal operation. And this is basically a current photograph with the Frankford Elevated substation building in bright sunlight with a Route K ready to discharge for its trip over to Ridge and Midvale. So the trackless came in 1949, but the work on Castor Avenue wasn't completed yet. So they went into storage down at Southern Depot, and you can see they're lettered for the city of Philadelphia, brand new coaches, waiting for the first day of service. And then by 1950, there's the new Bell's Corner Art Deco terminal up at the Bustleton and Castor Avenues intersection. And there's the ribbon cutting ceremony. I have no idea who these people are. I'm sure there was a mayor there and some other city officials, but everybody had to come out and cut the ribbon. Here's your promotional brochure. You can see, if you look at the map, you can see that there's Route 59 being re-extended back up to Bell's Corner now that Castor Avenue has been widened, and the Route 59B has been shifted over onto Bustleton, where it used to intersect with the trolley at Cotman Avenue for a 2-year period. This was something I was unaware of. Because Route 75 and 59 trackless coaches both were operating through on Arrott Street at the same boarding platform, the city of Philadelphia had a Route 59 stenciled on the back of the 59 coaches that they owned, so that passengers would know what coach was in front of them. That lasted until April of '66, when I-95 construction caused Route 75 to get cut back into the Arrott Street terminal. So it was no longer necessary to differentiate between the two coaches, because 75 then started boarding on the opposite platform against the substation. When 75 was operating through to Brightsburg, there was a cutback here at Edmond Street. And like I said, the I-95 reconstruction or construction caused this line to be truncated. In April of '66, it was not restored and was replaced by bus Route J, which again is Route 41. So now let's talk about Route 66, otherwise known as the Hop, Toad, and Frog. We talked about that at the last program. It was taken over by the PRTC in 1926. Route 66 began operating on January 2nd with large double-ended 5300 cars, as opposed to the smaller Hop, Toad, and Frog equipment. In 1927, the Bridge Street terminal for this service opened. So before then, the Hop Toad and Frog just boarded passengers in the middle of Bridge Street or on Frankford Avenue. Greg Street's loop opened without a substation in 1945. And then in 1955, buses were replacing trolleys for overhead modification. And by September 11th, trackless trolleys, larger Marmon Harrington TC-49 coaches began service, and the loop was reversed. So here's the Hop Toad and Frog struggling when it actually snowed heavy. Remember those days? And here's what the little cars look like that they operated. And the mystery we were talking about the other day was the fact that this car was photographed at the Brill plant, and it's lettered for the Frankfurt, Tacony, and Holmesburg, but it doesn't show up on any rosters. But thanks to Russ Jackson and Bill Vigris, they shared with me Brill history, and I found this page as well as this page about the car. So we have more information about this car that never seemed to make it to the roster, but you know, it was great to find that kind of stuff. So there's where the Hop Toad and Frog ran. They ran two routes. One was straight up Frankford Avenue to the city line with Bucks County, Andalusia Loop. And the second route ran up Tacony Street and State Road. That became Bus Route T. So here's 66 now being looped through the terminal on Bridge Street end. And you can see that that went all the way up to Andalusia along Frankford Avenue. It was a long route, and it was a very heavy route. It ran through the terminal in a clockwise direction. And they would pack them in. Believe me, that once those L's let go and all those passengers came down on the platform, they filled up these cars and bring in the next one. They used double-end cars not because of the Bridge Street end, but because of the loop up at City Line. It was a stub-end terminal, and it interchanged with the Neubauer Bus Company. But that's why they were using double-ended cars. So now it's the end of Route 66. You can see the trackless wires are up. It's the last car. Signs in the windows of the Route 66 here. Looks like there's a photo stop going on with a supervisor blocking traffic so that people can get a shot of the trolley.
That was a fan trip, actually.
Yes, I figured. Yeah.
Yeah, I was there that day.
Okay. Is that you in the? Never mind.
Yes.
So here there was as I explained, a period of conversion to bus initially, and that's when they reversed the loop going through Bridge Street. And then, of course, these new TC-49 trackless went into service on September 10th, 1955. There's the reversal of the loop. It went from a clockwise motion to counterclockwise, and then the vehicles exited on the Bustleton and went up to Cheltenham before they turned north on Frankford Avenue. Up at City Line, when you went to trackless, they needed to put in a new loop. And here you can see there's the 325. It was the one Marmon Harrington that received a chopper control system. It was a prototype. They ran that for a few years. My understanding is that the late Jeff Marinoff owned this coach and has it stored somewhere. Maybe it'll see service or see a museum at some point. And there's the new AM General trackless on the other side there. Now, the L didn't always run. There were strikes, and when the transit service wasn't operating, everybody said, oh, where's this Frankfurt Junction station? And as you can see, there isn't anything there to begin with. It was hardly a platform. There was a little bit of a shelter, but its usage was minimal until the L stopped running. And it was quite full this day. They were waiting for the next Trenton local. When? These strikes happened every 2 years. I don't know the exact date of this one, but they were quite frequent. So in 1964, SEPTA was created. And what's kind of interesting about the photo on the left is because they were all originally PTC buses, but by now they're all SEPTA buses, but they haven't changed colors. SEPTA finally started repainting its equipment and more in the image of the bus photo on the right there. And of course, they took over PTC operations in 1968. I drove just about, well, at least 3 or 4 of those buses that are in that picture. In 1976, we had a major change on the Frankford Elevated with the construction of 95 just to the north of Center City. They relocated the Frankford Elevated into the median of 95, and they had to build temporary trestling to be able, or temporary trestling to be able to run around the construction site. On the right, you can see there's a test train on the new trackage, while a regular revenue train is crossing over on the old Front Street Elevated. Then we got new trackless finally, to replace the Brill coaches that came in 48, 30 years earlier, and the later Marmon Harringtons. So these 110, I believe, coaches came, but they offered air-conditioned comfort. So they were a welcome sight. In 86, the Frankford Elevated Reconstruction Project started. What a project this was. The consultants were asked to review both the condition of the Market Street Elevated and the Frankford Elevated, and lo and behold, the Frankford Elevated needed to be rebuilt first. It was a $760 million project to rebuild 5.2 miles of right-of-way. It took 10 years. They did actually use concrete precast decks, and they installed them on the existing banks. They were found to be reusable. Direct fixation of track was used, which didn't help with the sound dampening, but that was the choice at the time. And of course, a station replacement effort was also undertaken. Some stations did not change. This is Tioga, and as it faces Harrogate Park. And I may have mentioned at the last program, I got this photograph on a Sunday morning. And my car was just to the left of me at this point. I moved 10 feet to get the shot. And in that 10 feet, I met a Doberman Pinscher. I got propositioned, and I saw a drug deal go down. I don't recommend doing that. So I talked about the air conditioning of the bud cars. There was one done. It was car 614, and there it is. They found the cost to be prohibitive, and that was the only car that was ever air conditioned. But we did get a new fleet of cars built by Adtrans in 1999, and they did have air conditioning. What a welcome relief to the Frankfurt customers that were windblown from those ceiling fans in the bud cars for all those years. And there's a great shot inside the plant, I believe, by Bob Wright. And these are all the features that these new cars offered to Market Frankfurt riders. They had external announcements, regenerative braking. There were 222 cars now. So we've gone from 315 to 270. Now we're down to 222 cars. So there's a trend going on here. And what do they do with the bud cars? Well, SEPTA never throws anything away. They just reuse it. So at the time, the Norristown high-speed line was suffering from a lack of active equipment. Most of their cars dated back to 1931 era. And so they repurposed some of the bud cars. But hey, wait a minute, aren't they different track gauges? Well, that's right. So they had to get wheel sets from these cars built for the Hudson and Manhattan line by the St. Louis Car Company in 1958. And they were standard gauge, which is what the Philadelphia Western Norristown High Speed Line, Route 100, what's it called now, is operating on. So now, in 2001, one of the largest capital projects that SEPTA ever undertaken to this point starts. And it was a massive effort. They moved the whole terminal off of Frankford Avenue onto the Frankford Transportation Depot site. They moved the station tracks, the platforms. They created accessible covered paths for transferring passengers between all modes. They eliminated conflicts between transit vehicles and pedestrians, which was a zoo. I mean, if you drove a bus out of Frankfurt and you had to move the bus between the depot and what they call the stand, where people boarded the bus for outbound service, you had to fight your way through a constant flow of people walking back and forth in front of the depot bays, and you just inched your way out. You never pulled right out, you just inched. They also fixed the parking issues. There was 1,000 space parking deck that wasn't built to accommodate commuters. And then there was a separate employee parking lot that was built to get the conflict resolved between the residents, the commuters, and the drivers, all competing for the same parking space. And there's the new transportation center completed. This is what it looked like on the left. It was very claustrophobic looking underneath the L structure on Frankford Avenue. You're looking north past Pratt Street. And then on right, it's all opened up to the sky now. It's beautiful. The Hammonds building, which we saw in some of the earlier construction photographs, is now open to the sky. And with the elevated structure not blocking its view, it looks quite nice. And it's used as a police district office for the transit police and a boarding staircase area for the new platforms. There's the new parking deck, 1,000 spaces on Bustleton Avenue. And then, of course, the new flyer coaches came in 2008. These are dual mode. What does that mean, dual mode? Well, it has a small diesel engine in the back of the coach, which allows these vehicles to operate off wire for short distances. In the case of a fire or a detour or blockage of some sort with construction work. They even use that feature when they pull out to the Arrott Street terminal now, because the wire would always be damaged underneath the elevated structure with trucks damaging the wire. So they just use the diesel engine to pull out to the stand down at Arrott Street. And 100 years later, look what we've got. We've got a rebuilt Market Frankfurt line, Frankford Elevated now. We got new cars running, which are, of course, are going to be replaced soon again. And there's the new dual mode trackless up at Bell's Corner. So we made it. We made it 100 years. So I just want to give you, again, to finish, a couple of then and nows for you guys. There's a shot by Kevin Painter taken by, or up near the, I guess, a hospital parking deck. Beautiful shot. I had to put that in. Kevin, if you're listening, thank you. There's the bridge over Gerard Avenue, what it looked like back in the day, and then today it's pretty much the same. Up at Bustleton, the trolley's no longer there, but you have the dual mode turning back at Bell's Corner and connecting to 58 service if you want to go to Bustleton today. Here's the Arrott Street terminal. We've come a long way. It's now accessible for passengers with wheelchairs. And there's the Art Deco loop. It looks pretty good. Even though it was built in 1950, it looks good today. And then, of course, down at Bridge Street, there's the Cedar Hill Cemetery building in the background with that single truck car 484, and then new modern fuel efficient buses on Route 3 today. And then here we are up at the Andalusia Loop, where the double end cars ended and connected to Neubauer Bus. You have a Route 66 terminal with the new dual mode coaches. And of course, Frontier Service is up here today too, operated by SEPTA. And here, this last shot I got the other day, I went to Wayne Junction, and that facility has been totally rebuilt. And they have a new layover location for Route 75. So I thought I'd throw that in here too. Thank you very much. So again, we do have the book available for sale. The proceeds go to the Frankford Historic Society. For those of you that are online, you can access their offerings on their website at this location. You want to copy it down. I also have copies of another book that I wrote called Rails Through Manayunk. I did a presentation last Wednesday on Rails Through Manayunk, and I know Dave extended an invitation to the West Jersey chapter membership. So if anybody did get a chance to tune into that program and is interested in learning more about Rails Through Manayunk, I have copies of the book here tonight. Thank you. Any questions?
They pick, can I hold it on the slide? For the practice track?
No, they pull the poles down before they change over. They can pull them down. No, they can. It's done. It was done in Boston. They had it where they would pull them down en route. Yeah. I haven't seen it done here. Usually they stop, have the poles pulled down, and then change over to the diesel power. The parking deck? Sometimes, like when they have a Super Bowl parade. Sometimes,
You have to have a CDL license to drive those?
yes. Which, the buses?
Yes.
Yes.
And the buses obviously modernized. Did the electricity get pumped up, or is the electricity the same today as it was in the 20s?
On the trackless, it's 600 volts DC. It's the same. 600 volts DC. It's the same.
Are the buses more electrically efficient today, or you don't know the answer?
The newer coaches, I don't know. We have a transportation engineer here. Russ, would you say that the newer flyer coaches are more energy efficient than the AM generals?
Because they're regenerative.
Okay, there you go. Well, they have regenerative braking, which we have on the L cars as well. Any other questions? Okay, silence is golden. All right, thank you very much.